So for this week's discussion, we focused on now the acceptance speeches of Kamala Harris and Mike Pence of the 2020 for the 2020 election. And I'm going to talk a little bit about both their speeches, the media portrayal of those speeches, but also want to talk about one key aspect of the chapter, which was from chapter 6, the avoiding feeding frenzies. And I'm going to get to that in a second. First of all, looking at the these two speeches compared to the two of Donald Trump and Joe Biden were a little bit more similar in that I felt both of these speeches were directly speaking to the American people. You know, Kamala Harris spoke again more towards minorities and the significance and the historical significance of her nomination and her accepting the nomination as the running mate of Joe Biden, but also talked about the things that Americans need to do to improve the situations. She talked about some of the issues that were going on, whether it was racism, even COVID and things like that. Mike Pence did a lot of the same. He spoke about, the military successes. He spoke about, our heroes in the military. He also spoke about COVID and some of the other issues that were there. But one of the things that Mike Pence did that I thought was really strategic is that he really tried to speak up Donald Trump. And so, when I talked about Donald Trump's speech last week, and it was a lot of I did this, I did that. I felt like in this particular speech given by Mike Pence, he talked about, sure, you may not agree with everything Donald Trump's done. You may not agree with all the things and the way he's done them. He's very brash. He's very this, he's very that. He has done a lot for America. He talked again about military. He talked again about some of his policies and the things that they're going to continue to fight for and continue to work for. And so I thought strategically, Donald Trump gave his speech and it was what it was expected to be, but Mike Pence comes in as the calming effect and trying to calm down some of that heightened hyper, I don't even know if vigilance is the word, but that hyper persona that Donald Trump has, to make it look like, yes, he is that, but he's also this. He's also for the American people. He's also done these successes. And so I felt like both speeches were really about focusing on the American people for, here's what we've done, here's what we need to do, here's why these are the accomplishments that we've done. These are great, and so on and so forth. And so when I start looking at the different news stories about the speeches afterwards, there's no secret that you have your outlets that are partisan. And so, where one outlet praised Mike Pence for his biblical type speech and unity and bringing America together and doing all the great things and giving hope. The other side of that was that the Democrats in Kamala Harris's speech seemed so concerned about and scared that people aren't going to turn out to vote. And so they only focused on making sure you get out to vote and maybe speaking directly towards minorities to get them out to vote. And so I felt like, again, partisan news outlets, that's what they do. They hype up their side and they try to, in this case, not overly bring down the other side, but more so just to kind of point out a few flaws and saying, they should feel very comfortable. They should feel very good in this, but they don't. They're worried about people not voting. And so that should be concerning to the Democratic Party. Then on the flip side of that, the news outlets that were supporting of the Democratic Party made it a point to point out, exactly that this was a historical achievement, the first African-American woman running mate, and pointed out how significant that is for the people, for, to give hope to the people, to try to achieve the things that maybe have not been achieved over the last 4 years of the presidency. And on the flip side, I don't think what I saw, and I looked at a couple of Fox News and maybe CNN and a couple about Mike Pence's speech, and it was more so again about just that Mike Pence was biblical, that he was, speaking directly to the people. It wasn't so much that he did these things really, really great or anything like that. It was just kind of to say, look, this is the calming effect that the Republican Party is going to have if they win, because people have been concerned about that, given some of the actions that had happened over the past 4 years. The question of fairness comes up again in the prompt. And I'm going to repeat what I said last week, or last discussion, in that I don't think it's a matter of fairness or unfairness. I mean, obviously, if you have a partisan news outlet, it's going to be geared towards, making one side, their side, look good, maybe trying to at least make the other side look, in this case, worried, sometimes look bad, maybe even tear them down. But at the same time, every party, both nominees, have their outlets that they can go to kind of spread their message. And so I don't think there's any unfairness, because they both have opportunities to put their message out there. Those that are people like me and you who watch and are going to be the voters, we're probably going to watch the outlet that we relate to most anyway, whether it's Democratic or Republican, liberal or conservative. In my case, I'm actually more likely to watch the local news here in San Antonio, just because I think it's the least biased of any of them. But again, I don't think it's unfair or more fair for one or less fair for the other. So that brings me to my last thought, because I don't want this to go on for 10 or 12 minutes like I did last time, was about the avoiding the feeding frenzies. And I think one of the things that really happened in both speeches is that there was nothing overly dramatic stated by either candidate that could really cause either side, either opposing side, to run off and be like, can you believe they said this? I can't believe this is their position. It just was speaking to the American people, one talking about these are the things we've done, which, to step back for a second, the Republican side was double the length than the Democratic side. But again, the Republicans have been in office for 4 years. And so Mike Pence did spend some time talking about the things that they have accomplished, the things they want to continue to move forward, trying to paint the current president at that time, which was Donald Trump, in a positive light. And on the flip side, Harris didn't have things to talk really about as far as accomplishments, because they hadn't been in the office yet. So she talked about the idea of hope and change and, historical moments. And so I think both of those, there was nothing frenzied about what they said that people could run off and be alarmed about, oh my God, this is where we're going if this person wins, or oh my, this is where we're going if that person wins. This is what we should be alarmed about. They're only going to worry about this group or that group, or they're only going to worry about this policy or that policy. And I think that, one of the strategies for managing the press on page 156 was that avoiding the frenzies. They didn't give the press really anything, either one of them, to just run off and, make major news stories of something that maybe not even had been there, just to create hits or create more support for or opposition against the opposing party. So those are my thoughts on the discussion this week. I hope those were clear. It's finally been a little bit of a better week in terms of not feeling sick. So I'm open to and ready for comments and discussions. I'd be glad to talk about any of this with any of you. Thank you.